I see that folks are still entering the room, so I'm going to give folks just another couple of moments before we get started. So we'll probably start in about 2. So thank you guys for your patience. Tammy, I see a couple of folks with their hands up. Would you unmute Jan and see if we can answer their question?
Hi, thank you. I just want to clarify, is this for self-direction or traditional?
Today's presentation is focused on traditional certified family home providers. We gave a
Okay.
presentation yesterday focused on self-direction, and that was recorded and will be made available, and they're shortly on the My Choice Matters website.
Okay, because the email that I got must have had it switched around.
Oh, I'm
'Cause
sorry about
it's,
that.
yeah. Um, okay, well, this isn't for me then today.
Definitely the basics in terms of how the new model is constructed is the same across of all of the presentations. So you are definitely welcome to stay on and hear kind of the basics, but it is a little more focused on traditional, and the slides from yesterday's presentation that are more focused on self-direction will be made available on the My Choice Matters website.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And then I believe we had a second question. Would you unmute Joanne?
Yeah, we just saw that we're the only attendee, so we could come back at one of the later sessions if we're the only non-panelist on this thing.
There are actually, it looks like about 52 attendees, according to my records,
Oh,
and what
okay.
I'm seeing right now. So thank you so much, and we'll get started here in just another second or so. All right, well, good morning or almost afternoon, depending on where you're located. My name is Alina Vasquez, and I am with Human Services Research Institute. We are the contractor who has been supporting the department in the development of the new budget model for the last couple of years. And the presentation today is going over some of the basics of the new budget model that will be implemented shortly, with a specific focus on how it impacts certified family home providers who are serving participants who use traditional services. There will be multiple versions of this training. So the first of the live trainings is happening today. There will be additional sessions on September 10th and, June 10th and June 27th. Although the same material will be covered in each of these sessions. So folks only need to plan to attend one. All of this information will also be made available on the My Choice Matters website. We have a new button on that site specifically for trainings and informational sessions where you can find slides from this, as well as recordings from this and all the other trainings that we'll be doing over the coming weeks and months. Why don't we start with just a couple of quick training reminders? The first thing I want to make sure folks are aware of is please ask questions. We know that this information may be new for a lot of folks on the line today, and this will not be your only opportunity to hear or get this information. We also have a new manual coming out, as well as all of the recordings that we described, so feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. We will be pausing periodically, and folks can feel free to put their questions into the chat box. Make sure that you direct those questions to all panelists to make sure that I'm able to see the questions and respond. However, just so you know, because I'm sharing my full screen, I may not see your chat immediately when it comes up, but I will be pausing throughout the presentation. Also, when we pause, people can feel free to raise their hand and we can take you off mute if you'd prefer to ask a question verbally. Again, trainings are recorded. This copy will be available, and any additional questions you may have, you can direct to the HCBS waivers mailbox, which will then be recorded and responded when possible. Just a quick overview of the material we're going to cover today. We're going to start by talking about the new assessments that will be introduced and how they will be used. We'll then discuss how support levels and service mixes are assigned, how a participant's budget is determined, using something known as a model mix, which we will describe, the ways that someone's budget can be changed, known as budget modifications, a new concept known as a mid-year plan, and when addendums may be needed. We'll review applicable IDAPA rules, walk through the new ISP form, show you the CFH questionnaire, discuss new services, and describe how you can enroll to provide other services that may be applicable to the participant that you're currently serving. Let's start with a bit of background as to how we came to need a new budget model. There was a class action lawsuit filed in Idaho that's been come to known as KWV Armstrong. In that suit, the court held that the existing budget tool violated individuals' due process rights because of its unreliability. As a result, the department and the American Civil Liberties Union, who represented participants as the class, entered a settlement agreement back in 2016. Under that settlement agreement, the department agreed to change the way it determines budgets for individuals in the adult DD program. The purpose of this presentation is to explain some of those changes, as well as other related changes the department is making in the coming months. Community Now was initially formed in consideration of the requirement under KW for additional stakeholder input. This group met with great frequency back in 2017 and came out with a series of recommendations. The Community Now group is still ongoing and still meets to get additional facts and details with regard to those recommendations. The initial report recommended a few things that impact the service changes we're going to talk about today. One of the recommendations was for a more flexible service model to support adults to better meet their needs and explore their interests in the community. Another recommendation from Community Now was to include pre-vocational, career planning, and more individual support and employment in the benefits package available to adults in the program. Directly in response to Community Now, there have been a series of changes made to the services available within the program. The first are changes to supported living. Participants who currently receive supported living may receive that at an hourly, high, or intense basis. Moving forward, high and intense are going to be going away. Folks who use supported living will now be able to receive other services, including adult day health, developmental therapy, and community rehabilitation. They can also still obtain 24 hours of support from their supported living provider if they so choose. We've also added 3 new traditional services, which we'll talk about later in the presentation. These include pre-vocational services, career planning, and community rehabilitation. Sublimits for many of the services have been removed, and non-medical transportation has been moved off of the waiver and onto the HCBS DD state plan to allow for more individuals to be able to access that service. The presentation today is organized by the key steps that are involved in receiving adult DD services. Initial applicants need to start with an application. That's where they simply identify what they're seeking and begin the process of determining whether or not they are eligible. Only folks who are seeking services for the first time need to take part in that step, and there was one small change to the application in alignment with the move to the new model. For all existing participants, the vast majority of people who use the program, and probably all the people you serve today, the first step that they must engage in every year to continue getting adult DD services is to conduct the assessment. Following the assessment, they are issued a budget notice, which tells them what dollars they have to spend in order to develop their plan or individual support plan or ISP. Once the plan has been approved, an individual can then start getting the services that meet their needs. For a lot of participants, that's the last step in the process for the year. And then in the following year, they go back and get a new assessment and start the process all over again. However, some individuals may need to make changes to the services they receive during the year, and that is a possible step in the process, which we will also talk about during the training today. Let's get started with the first step for all existing participants, the assessment process. Currently, adults in the Adult DD program are assessed using the SIB-R. Moving forward, there will be 2 new assessments used for the purposes of the program. The first is the Vineland III. The Vineland III is going to replace the SIB-R for the purposes of identifying program eligibility and establishing whether or not a participant meets ICFID level of care. We'll talk about both of those things a little bit more in just a moment. The second assessment is the Supports Intensity Scale Adult. This assessment will be replacing the SIB-R and the inventory of needs to help determine annual budgets. The new budget model requires a valid and reliable assessment of support need. In order to meet this need, a work group was convened back in 2017 or 2018 to select what new assessment would best meet the department's needs and be respectful of individuals using services. That work group, which included both department staff and external advocates, discussed a number of tools and selected the CSA as the tool that was best fit in order to meet all of the department's needs for the tool and to be as person-centered as possible. Currently, the plan is for new assessment tools to go live on June 1st, 2022. However, that date could change because the department is still awaiting approval from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS. That approval is necessary before these changes can go into effect. For now, the plan is still to move forward on June 1st, 2022, with participants who have assessments scheduled on that day forward to receive a Vineland III and a CSA. However, if we hear that CMS is not going to be able to approve these requested changes by that date, the department will make that information widely available and announce the new proposed go-live date. One other general item you should be aware with regard to assessments is the need to revise the assessment schedule. Typically, participants receive a full assessment every 3 years. In the other 2 years, they receive a focused review, just confirming that no major changes have been made in their support needs. During the implementation period, all participants will need to receive a CSA and a Vineland III in just about 1 year. It takes a lot longer and is a lot more labor intensive in order to conduct a full assessment versus a focused review. Therefore, after the implementation year, it'll be necessary to redivide participants so only 1/3 of participants will receive a full assessment each year, and the other 2/3 will receive focused reviews. In order to do that, the department will divide participants into 3 groups, Group A, Group B, and Group C. Assignment to these groups will, for the most part, be at random, and participants will be informed as to which group they were assigned at around the time of their CSA and Vineland assessment. Individuals who are assigned to Group A will receive a full assessment during the implementation year, so 2022 to 2023. They will then receive another full assessment in the following year, 2023 to 2024. After that, they will get 2 focused reviews before getting their next full assessment. Participants who are assigned to Group B will also get that full assessment during the implementation year. They will then get a focused review for the following plan year before getting another full assessment in 2024 to 2025. They then too will receive 2 years of focused reviews before getting their next full assessment. Participants assigned to Group C will also get that full assessment for implementation and will then have 2 years of focused reviews before getting their next full assessment in 25 to 26. Participants, again, will be assigned at random for the most part, with the one exception being that participants who volunteered to participate in the practice CSAs to help finalize the training needed for Liberty assessors will be automatically placed into Group C. This is done as a thank you measure, noting that those folks have just done a CSA and will need to do another in the 2022 to 2023 plan year in order to move into implementation. Therefore, they will then have 2 years of focused reviews before having to do another full assessment. Any participant who has a change in condition at any point during this period will go ahead and receive another full assessment as soon as it is needed, irrespective of the schedule we just described. New participants will receive a full assessment on a regular 3-year cycle based on when they enter the program. I'm going to pause and see if any questions have come up before we dig into the Vineland III. I'm not seeing any in chat yet. And I do not see any hands raised. All right, so we are just going to keep on going. Now let's talk a little bit more about the Vineland III. Again, this is the assessment that's used to determine both program eligibility and eligibility for ICFID level of care. The assessor and respondents will review and discuss the adaptive behaviors of the individual seeking services in the following areas during the Vineland III. Those areas are communication, daily living skills, socialization, motor skills, and maladaptive behaviors. In order to be eligible for the DD program, someone must meet 3 specific criteria. The first is they must be an adult, meaning they're 18 years or older. The second is they must have a qualifying diagnosis that was made before the age of 22. They must also submit documentation with their application that shows that qualifying diagnosis. These kinds of diagnoses could include intellectual disability, autism, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, or other closely related conditions. The third piece of the criteria, and the piece that is identified with the support of the Vineland III, is that an individual must have a substantial limitation in at least 3 major life activities. The major life activities are defined as self-care, receptive and expressive language, learning, mobility, self-direction, capacity for independent living, and economic self-sufficiency. Again, someone must require a substantial limitation in at least 3 of these in order to be eligible for the program. All adults who meet program eligibility are then able to receive state plan HCBS services. Being eligible for the program equals the ability to receive that host of services. We'll talk next about how someone can be eligible to receive waiver services. So exactly how is the Vineland III used to help establish that a participant has a substantial limitation in at least 3 major life activities? The table on the screen shows you the exact criteria that are used to establish that substantial limitation in each of the areas. I'll go through just 1 or 2 as an example, but in the interest of time, I won't walk through the entire chart, noting that this slideshow will be made available on the My Choice Matters website. So, if we're trying to identify if Andrea has a substantial limitation in self-care, her responses to the personal subdomain in the Vineland III will give us that answer. If she has a V-scale score of less than or equal to 10, then yes, she will have a substantial limitation. So if Andrea scored a 10 on the personal subdomain, then that would be one of the 3 required areas of substantial limitation in order to receive program eligibility. Different areas of major life activity use slightly different chunks of this Vineland III in order to see if a substantial limitation exists. Receptive and expressive language uses a score from the entire communication domain. Self-direction uses the score from both the community subdomain and the coping skills subdomain. Learning uses the entire adaptive behavior composite, or can be identified using an IQ score. The adaptive behavior composite of the Vineland III is a combination of the communication, daily living, and socialization subdomains. Next, let's talk about ICFID level of care criteria. All individuals who applied for waiver services and meet ICFID level of care are eligible to receive waiver services. They can then choose to receive those services using traditional or self-direction. In addition to meeting the DD eligibility requirements for the entire program, someone seeking ICFID level of care must require active treatment and must meet one of the criteria detailed below. That is a functional need, a behavioral need, a combined functional behavioral need, or a medical need, which would require someone to be placed or receive services from an intermediate care facility for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. That need is a precursor for being able to waive that type of service and instead receive services in their community through the DD waiver. Again, the Vineland III is the tool used to help identify if someone has the required functional behavioral or combined functional behavioral needs in order to meet this criteria. Again, I'll just provide a quick example instead of reading the entire slide. So for someone to meet on the basis of their functional needs, they must have a Vineland III adaptive behavior composite of less than 55. If someone were to meet on the behavioral criteria, that could be on the basis of having a maladaptive internal or external score of greater than or equal to 21, or could be due to a maladaptive or internal score that's less than 21 if they also engage in aggressive or self-injurious behaviors. Again, ICFID level of care equals the ability to receive waiver services. Now let's walk into the CIS, the assessments being used to help identify a participant's budget. So who attends the CSA interview? Adults with IDD are always invited and encouraged to take part in the interview. However, if they do not want to participate, they are not required to do so. What is required is that at least 2 people who know the adult well and understand his or her support needs be present for the entire interview. It is the adult's choice who will take part in the CSA interview, and they are welcome to also be a respondent. However, based on the recommendations from the developers of the tool, 2 additional individuals need to be present for the entire interview. The CSA is divided into 3 overarching areas. The first area is called Section 1 and is specific to exceptional medical and behavioral support needs. Section 2 is known as the Support Needs Index and talks about the kinds of support someone needs in a variety of areas, including home living, community living, lifelong learning, employment, health and safety activities, and social activities. Section 3 is known as the Protection and Advocacy Scale. Participants are assigned to a level on the basis of their general support need using particular portions of Section 2 of the CSA, specifically Sections 2A, 2B, and 2E. This is often referred to as some ABE. Individuals can be assigned to levels specifically for individuals who have exceptional medical or exceptional behavioral needs on the basis of having a verified support need, which we'll talk about in a minute. The CIS can be utilized to help identify individuals who may be more likely to meet that level, that criteria for those levels, using responses to Section 1, as well as their responses to the supplemental questions, which ask additional information regarding the exact amount of support hours a participant needs for their extraordinary medical or behavioral needs. Each participant is assigned to only one support level. This is important to remember because a participant could meet the criteria for more than one level. For example, if I have a sum ABE score of 29 and I have an extraordinary medical support need that is verified by the verification review team, then I would meet the criteria for both level 2 and level M. When a participant meets the criteria for 2 levels, they will be assigned to the level of the greatest need. If a participant meets the criteria for both levels M and B, they will be assigned to the level that the verification review team identifies is the primary driver of their extraordinary support need. Levels 1, 2, and 3, again, are assigned based on those CSA scores. So that is a standard score of 8 to 22 on sections 2A, 2B, and 2E for the purposes of level 1. A score of 23 to 30 on those sections to be placed into level 2 for individuals with relatively moderate support needs, or a score between 31 and 52 for individuals to be assigned to level 3 for those with relatively high general support needs. Again, we'll talk more about the criteria to enter level M and level B next, but I'll pause and see if we've had any questions come up. Okay, I see some questions. The first one I'm seeing is, will these assessments be in person? So currently assessments are being done typically over Zoom. That may change in the near future, but again, that really is just dependent on the public health emergency and the status of COVID-19. I see another comment, just noting that the email that was sent incorrectly identified that this training was focused on self-direction. I apologize for that error. And there are additional trainings that will be developed, or excuse me, that will be provided specific to self-direction. And that self-directed training we did yesterday is recorded and will be available soon on the My Choice Matters site. I also see a
Alina,
question.
if I could just,
Oh yeah, please go ahead.
sorry. If I could just clarify for a moment, there was a second email that was sent on April 27th with the correct trainings. So please check your email because there is a second email that has all of that documented, all of the training information.
Thank you so much, Livia. The next question I see is Down syndrome considered one of the first eligibility requirements? Yes, Down syndrome does qualify under one of the eligible diagnoses. What are the parameters and who determines what active treatment entails? Active treatment is defined both in federal and IDAPA rule, I do believe, and it is the Liberty assessor who is doing the determination of whether or not the individual requires active treatment. I do not have the citation directly to the language around the requirements around active treatment. Livia, if that is something that you have access to, if you drop it in the chat for folks, that would be great. I see a comment here that I'm not understanding the context for. I apologize. Two adults that would be like ourselves, mother and father. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what that's referring to.
I think they were talking about the respondents.
Oh, got it, got it. Yes, two respondents could be both someone's mother and father if they both knew the participant's support needs well and could speak to those needs. And then I see two more, okay. A question asking, can we get a hold of the assessments so we can preview the questions? We will be doing a training specifically for participants and available recorded for others with more detail around the questions. The developers of the tool do not make all of the questions themselves available to the general public, so it's not possible for the department to send out the full tool ahead of time. However, there definitely are resources that provide more detail about the questions that will be asked in both assessments, so folks have a good sense and know what kinds of information will be asked during that assessment. And I see that Andrea did pop into the chat the requirements for active treatment. Thank you for that, Andrea. I'm not seeing any hands raised. Oh, I see another question that came up asking, if my child is currently receiving DB services, these new tests could take away the services if they don't fall into the new criteria. I will answer that question in more detail in a little while, but the short answer is the intention of moving to a new tool to determine eligibility, both for waiver and for the program, is not to reduce the criteria or to make it harder to get into the program. It really is just a change from one tool to another, but the same general requirements around what is anticipated or expected to be the needs of individuals seeking and utilizing services from the program is intended to be the same. There are some additional factors which also impact the potential that the change in criteria would adjust people's eligibility, and we will talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. Okay. I'm going to keep us moving along and start talking about how someone can enter into support levels M or B. So as I already noted, individuals who can be assigned to levels M or B using a verified support need. This process is known as verification review, and it is very similar to the intense review process that participants can access currently if they receive supported living services. One major change is that the new verification review process and levels M and B will be available to all participants and not just limited to those participants in one type of residential setting. A participant simply will be asked during the assessment, or the respondents, if the participant is not available, if they believe that the individual would meet the criteria for levels M and B and whether or not they would like to pursue verification review. Anyone who would like to pursue verification review may do so. This slide also provides the specific criteria for inclusion into level M. I will note that this IDAPA citation is not up to date because this is using the rules that will be coming very shortly. Those have not yet been published, but when they do, this citation will be reflective of the requirement to meet or be assigned to level M. So, in order to assign to a level M, someone must have a chronic or acute medical condition, which is complex, unstable, or both. They must require one-to-one staffing to provide frequent intervention and constant monitoring for all or substantial portions of the day. And without such intervention and monitoring, the individual would require placement in a nursing facility, hospital, or ICFID. Again, a participant who meets all of these criteria submits documentation showing that they meet this criteria to the verification review team will be assigned to level M. Participants who have extraordinary behavioral support needs will be assigned to level B once that need has been verified. Here too is the citation for the exact criteria for entry into level B. There are a variety of criteria that can get someone into level B. However, there is one consistent element that is true among all of the different information on this slide. That is, in order to be assigned to level B, the individual must require one-to-one staffing to provide frequent intervention and constant monitoring for at least 16 hours a day in order to prevent reoffending of the behavior in question. The other variations include that someone may have a pending felony charge related to the serious injury or harm of another person. They may be on probation for a recent felony charge related to the serious injury or harm of another person. They may be on parole from incarceration for a felony conviction related to the serious injury or harm of another person. They may be released for time served from incarceration for a conviction related to serious injury or harm of another person. They may have a history of predatory sexual activity, either that which has been addressed due to adjudication or simply by exhibiting the kinds of behavior that could result in misdemeanor or felony charges. And they must be identified as being at high risk to reoffend based on a sexual offender risk assessment that has been completed in the last 3 years by an appropriate professional. The last possible criteria for assignment into level B is an individual who has a documented, sustained history of serious aggressive behavior, which could include causing harm to themselves or others, and that this behavior includes the ability to carry out such a threat as to cause a reasonable fear of bodily harm to another or to themselves, and that they actually have the ability to conduct that kind of behavior. Again, across all of these criteria, the individual must require one-to-one support to address the problematic behavior for at least 16 hours a day. As I mentioned, the CSA is utilized to help identify individuals who may be identified as being more likely to potentially meet the criteria for levels M or level B. This is known as flagging for verification. Individuals who flag for verification can still decline to complete verification review if they do not wish to do so. The purpose is simply to identify individuals who may have the type of needs that align with meeting that criteria. In order to be flagged for level M, an individual must have responded to a one or more to at least one item in Section 1A of the CSA. They must also have answered yes to the medical supplemental question and must have indicated on the supplemental question that they require 84 hours of support per week or more for their extraordinary medical support need. Similarly, individuals can flag for level B if they've responded of a one or more to at least one item in Section 1B on extraordinary behavioral support needs in the CSA. If they have responded yes to the supplemental question on behavior, and if they have indicated a need for at least 84 hours of support per week for their extraordinary behavioral support needs. Individuals can also flag based on a combined need for medical and behavioral support. This is done if they've responded to a one or more on at least one item in both sections 1A and 1B, responded yes to both supplemental questions, and identified a need for a combined amount of support of 84 hours or more in their responses to both of the supplemental questions around the behavioral support need and the medical support need. Any individual who requests verification, both those who flag and those who do not, will be provided the verification questionnaire and told to submit that questionnaire along with any supporting documentation within 14 days of the assessment. Individuals can also request verification at any point during the plan year, but we highly recommend that this request come at the time of assessment. Those individuals who do not request verification review will be assigned to levels 1, 2, or 3 based on their CSA scores in the way that we already described. The verification questionnaire is a new form that is being added in alignment with the new model. So on the next slide, I'll provide you a little more detail with an example from that questionnaire. The questionnaire is divided by the different types of criteria that someone may meet in order to be assigned to levels M or B. You will only need to complete the section of the questionnaire that is relevant to the individual you are completing it for. So, in this example, someone believes that they have an extraordinary medical support need. Therefore, they would complete the section on extraordinary medical level of support. They would then need to answer this series of questions, which include what chronic or acute medical condition does the individual have that requires one-on-one staffing? What type of symptoms or risks require that one-to-one staffing ratio to provide frequent interventions and constant monitoring, and provides the kinds of examples of the sorts of things that may qualify. Asks what interventions are provided or are recommended for each of these symptoms throughout the day and how often. And then asks, have there been any hospitalizations over the last year related to these medical conditions? And if so, ask that you provide details, including the dates of admission, the length of stay, and the outcome. The form also provides a recommendation for the kinds of medical documentation that may support the need for that extraordinary medical level of support. So for here, examples include provider logs, ER reports, diagnostic reports, and hospital discharge summaries. A section for each of the other types of criteria that someone could meet on the behavioral side also exists on the form. Again, you do not need to complete the entire questionnaire, but only the section that's relevant for the individual that you are responding on behalf of. This slide provides a little bit more detail about the kinds of supporting documentation that can be submitted to the verification review team. Again, guidance on the kinds of documentation that make sense is included for each section of the questionnaire to help support folks in finding the correct documentation. The verification review team is the body who will be responsible for reviewing all of the verification review requests and making determinations. This group includes a clinically licensed behavioral health professional, a representative from quality assurance at BDDS, a representative care manager from BDDS, a licensed practical or registered nurse, a representative from the FACTS crisis prevention team, a qualified intellectual disabilities professional, and an administrative member. The team will be responsible for identifying if the participant meets any criteria for level M or B, using the verification questionnaire, any additional documents that were submitted, as well as relevant records that are maintained by the department. The participant's eligibility and budget notice will include the information about the team's decision, their rationale, and exactly what documents they reviewed in order to make that decision. Participants always have the right to appeal a decision by the VRT team if they do not agree. With that, we've concluded our section on how a participant is assigned to a support level. I will pause again and ask for questions before we dig into the next section around how a participant selects their service mix. Okay, I see one question asking where we find a list of acceptable diagnoses. Livia, is that something that you could answer?
I did put that IDAPA link in the chat, but I see that I did not put it for everyone, so I will go ahead and plug that in for everyone to see.
Thank you. And then I see a question that asks, if a client is already living in a CFH and does not meet criteria, will they lose their services? Again, so for that question, I believe what that's asking is if someone is currently living in a CFH, but then is not identified as meeting the ICFID level of care requirement using the new tool, because CFH is a service that's only available to participants on the waiver, would they lose the ability to live in that certified family home? Again, we'll talk about this more in a little bit more detail. The short answer is no, because of some additional requirements that are in place over the next couple of years. However, the longer term answer is participants must complete eligibility determination on a regular basis in order to keep getting services. So if someone's needs have changed in such a way that they no longer are eligible to receive the services they've received in the past, then there is the potential that someone could lose services they've previously received. If that were the case, they would always have the right to appeal that decision. And again, that specific situation will not occur for the next couple of years for some reasons we'll talk about here in a few more moments. I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. Do we have any hands raised?
I don't see any.
Okay.
Oh, one just popped up.
Okay, thanks so much.
Do I speak? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, excellent. I just had a quick question. They put up a minute ago a place to look up something, and it went away real quickly. I only got 16.03 written down. Could I have that again? It was somebody, it was a little note that came up right above the place where you click on wanting to ask a question. And it was something that had been requested, and so they put up a little quick link location.
Yep. So if you're looking for the list of acceptable diagnoses, that is included in IDAPA at 16.03.10.501.
Yeah, I thought 10 was next. Okay, so that must be it. And this is under where in the web?
So if you type into like Google or your preferred search engine, IDAPA, IDAPA, that's the Idaho, oh gosh, I'm gonna mess up that acronym,
No,
but it's the administrative rules.
The acrostics drive me crazy. Okay, administrative rules. I'll write that down, and I'm sure it would come up something.
Yeah, if you type in capital I, capital D, capital A, capital P, capital A, and then that link, it will absolutely show up for you.
Got it. That's what I want. I just didn't get the whole thing. I was trying. I write really fast, but it just disappeared. Thank you.
All right, with that, we're going to keep on going and talk some more about the service mix. So a service mix is simply a term that we use to group participants based on the way that they want to receive their supports and the type of residential supports that they want to receive. Participants have the right to change their service mix at any time with only one small exception, and that is individuals who are assigned to the state plan HCBS only service mix can only change that mix if they then receive DD waiver eligibility. There is only one service mix for individuals who are eligible for the program, but not eligible for the waiver. So all individuals who fall into that category will be assigned to the state plan HCBS only service mix. Other participants can select between the other 6 service mixes as they see fit and as they would like to receive their services. Individuals who want to receive their traditional services from a certified family home provider will all be assigned to the CFH service mix. Again, this is the mix that's for traditional participants who receive residential habilitation from a certified family home provider. A participant's budget is determined using 2 factors: someone's support level, and we just described how someone gets assigned their support level of 1, 2, 3, M, or B, and the service mix they've selected. Again, for individuals who are using traditional services and they live in a certified family home, The service mix that is applicable is the Certified Family Home Service mix. Each support level and service mix combination has its own model mix. The model mix is something we'll talk about in the next couple slides, but the short answer for what that is just the way that we determine the budget. A participant can also get services above what is assigned within their budget using one of three different kinds of budget modifications. The first is a health or safety service request. The second is a health or safety budget modification request. And the third is an employment-related service request. And we'll talk about all three of those here in a little bit. So model mixes are developed by identifying the average type and amount of service the department anticipates individuals will use within each support level and service mix. Model mixes are then priced out to determine the precise budget. Participants are not required to use the services or the combination of services that are included in the model mix. It's simply the mechanism that's used to build out the budget. Model mixes can also be changed as needed. In fact, these model mixes were recently changed because the rates applicable for some services were changed during the last legislative session. And so we were able to go in to the model mixes and adjust the rates that were entered so that the budgets reflected the new rates that were in play. So how does a model mix work? We simply identify all of the available services and then how much the department anticipates an average participant at a given level and service mix would want to use of that service in a given year. They then take that amount of service, multiply it by the applicable rate paid for that service, and that equals the dollars or the value that should be added to the budget for that service. We then complete that process for every service within the model mix. We add those all together, and that's how we get to the total budget. Within the new model, the budget is divided into three different components. By and large, participants are limited to using the dollars within a given component for services that fall within that component. So, a participant can only use the dollars that are allocated to obtain their certified family home supports to obtain certified family home supports. A participant can only use the dollars that are allocated to obtain their planning supports, so the support to build their plan and to get their service coordination, to use those kinds of services. The majority of supports live in the discretionary support section. These can be used flexibly as a participant sees fit to meet their goals and aspirations. Participants can also receive services outside of the budget that are those health, safety, or employment services, which we'll talk about more in a second. And participants can also add more dollars to the discretionary section of their budget if they need more of that for a health or a safety reason. Here is what services fall into each of the different budget components under the new model. Again, for participants who have chosen the Certified Family Home Service mix, the only applicable residential support is Certified Family Home. Participants who've selected to get their services from a supported living provider would be assigned to the supported living service mix, and that is the service they would receive from that component. Discretionary supports are the vast majority of supports that are available. They include things like adult day health, developmental therapy, all of our new services, including pre-vocational, career planning, and community rehabilitation, non-medical transportation, two services which are specific to individuals who do not receive paid in-home habilitation. So those are respite and chore services, and then supplemental supported living services, which are available for participants who choose the supported living mix and would prefer to get their services on a 24-hour basis from their supported living provider instead of using discretionary supports. Planning supports include service coordination and plan development, and health, safety, employment supports is a list of services that a participant can receive outside of their budget by simply meeting the criteria for those specific services. That includes skilled nursing, specialized medical equipment, environmental accessibility adaptations, behavior consultation, home delivered meals, etc. The next slide I'm going to show you is the model mix for traditional certified family home. I will warn you, it is a little bit hard to read because it's a very big document. I'm going to just use the next slide to orient you to how the model mixes are organized, and then we'll dig into one level in a bit more detail here in just a moment. So when you're looking at one of the model mixes, the first thing to note is that the different support levels are across the top. Support level 1, 2, 3, M, and B. Down the left-hand side, you see the different budget components: residential budget, discretionary budget, planning budget, and then the total. The second column details all of the applicable services that can be included into the mix. The next column provides the reimbursement rate that is applicable for a given service. It provides it both on a 15-minute basis and on an hourly basis for those per unit services, provides it on a daily basis or per diem for certified family home, as that is how that service is paid, and provides it on a per mile basis for non-medical transportation. I'm going to then move to the next slide so you can see this with a little more detail. So looking at the discretionary services for level 1, you can see all of the services listed, the relevant rate as I've described, and then the number of hours per week that are included in the mix. So for level 1, adult day health, which is paid at $11.16 an hour, 4 hours per week are included in the model mix. Again, that is not a limitation so that someone can only receive that amount of hours of adult day health. It's simply the figure that was used to build into the budget. These 4 hours per week are then multiplied by a 50-week year. We understand there are 52 weeks in a year, but the majority of services in the discretionary services section are done for a 50-week year, accounting for reasons why someone may not be in those kinds of services: vacation, holidays, things of that nature. It's very typical in budget construction for these kinds of services to be done on a 50-week year versus a 52-week year. I'll note that the per diem for certified family home is done on a basis of 365 days. So you multiply the 4 hours per week by 50 weeks per year. That gets you to a total of 200 hours. You then multiply that 200 hours by the applicable rate, $11.16. As a result, $2,232 were added to the budget for the purposes of adult day health. We follow that same process down the line for each of the discretionary services. 5 hours were added for developmental therapy center-based, 5 hours were added for developmental therapy community-based, 3 hours per year were added for developmental therapy evaluation, 1 hour per week for career planning, 3 hours per week for community rehabilitation individual, and 5 hours per week for community rehabilitation group. 3,600 miles were added to non-medical transportation. Again, not a limit, just the way that the dollars were added to the budget, to get to a total discretionary services total of $27,955.40. Now let's go back out and look at the other components of the budget. Again, that $27,955 is the subtotal for discretionary supports. The residential budget for folks receiving certified family home services is the current daily rate, $53.39, times the number of days per year, so a total of just under $19,500. And planning supports were added for both plan development and service coordination. This amount is consistent across all levels, across all traditional service mixes, with an additional $3,191.76 added to the plan for those supports. You add together these three subtotals for the residential, discretionary, and planning to get to that total budget. Again, there are still those services you can obtain outside of this budget. There is not a requirement that you use the specific combination of services that are provided in the model mix, but simply this is the number of dollars that are available to then purchase those services that the individual at level 1 would like to receive. Again, all of the model mixes are available on the My Choice Matters website. They are updated with the new rates, and so I welcome you to go take a look at those. You can blow them up on your screen and make them a little bit bigger so they're easier to read. All are built in the same basic construction, with the services going down the left-hand side and the levels going across the top. Next, we're going to talk about budget modifications. But before we do so, let's see if any new questions have come in. Oh, one question has come in. Could one of the services be transportation, help to and from a job? Yes, transportation specifically for the purposes of supported employment or competitive community employment can be provided outside of the budget, as that is a designated employment service and can be added to the plan with some requirements showing exactly where the person is traveling to, how many miles are required, and the general schedule for the person's work. It is required that that job be paid at a competitive wage, so at least minimum wage, and be in the community. Okay. My current client receives only residential supports, planning supports, and job coaching services in the current budget. Then will those three parts be transferred over to the new budget? Or will we have to reapply for job coaching services since it falls into discretionary services? Job coaching services or supported employment is a service that is provided outside of the budget, as that is an applicable employment service. So when the participant you're serving comes due to get their new assessments and to write their next plan, they could then add supported employment or job coaching to their plan under the health, safety, or employment services and would not need to utilize their budget dollars to obtain that service. They could continue getting their planning supports and their CFH supports, and then identify if there are any other discretionary supports they would like to add for the new plan year. This is a great question. My son gets CFH through aged and disabled waiver, but then gets DDA through DD waiver. Is this one of the mixes? Yes, the service mix that would apply to your son in that circumstance is the state plan HCBS only mix. That is because it's only the dollars that are applicable from the DD program. The CFH that's provided through the aged and disabled waiver happens completely separately. So if you look at the model mixes that are available on the My Choice Matters website and look at the state plan HCBS only mix, that will be the applicable mix and the applicable budget for your son. Note that it does not include the dollars for the CFH because those are provided through a separate service under the aged and disabled waiver. The next question is, will they be adjusting the CFH rates in the future? I can take a first step at that, but we'll ask Lydia to chime in if needed. Yes, so there has been a commitment made by the department to take a look at the current certified family home rates and look at potentially adjusting that reimbursement. That's a process that's currently underway. It is not yet concluded, which is why for now, the model mixes include the current reimbursement rate of $53.39 a day. However, when that process concludes and if that rate is changed, the model mixes can then be changed to account for the new applicable rate for certified family home.
Thank you, Alina. That covers it. I don't have anything additional to add.
I think those are all the questions in the chat. Do we have any hands raised?
There's one, but I think she just didn't put her hand down. Teresa asked the question last time.
Okay. Well, then let's move on to budget modifications, or the services and support someone can receive in addition to the budget. So budget modifications include a host of services that we've already described, including behavior consultation, community transition, crisis, home delivered meals, environmental accessibility adaptations. Employment services include supported employment or job coaching, and transportation specifically for the purposes of supported employment. Participants can receive all of those services by simply meeting the service-specific criteria for use of that service. This slide shows you an attachment that will be included in the new budget notices that provides in detail all of the designated health and safety services, as well as all of the designated employment services and the specific service-specific criteria that need to be utilized in order to obtain that service. All that needs to happen is that those services need to be added to the plan with your plan developer and the required documentation will need to be submitted to the care manager in order to add that service to your plan. Those services do not come out of your plan budget, but can simply be added on top of it with no special forms other than making sure the required documentation is included. The list of service-specific criteria is also included in Chapter 8 of the External Traditional Manual that will be released very shortly. There's also the ability to get a budget modification for a health or a safety risk. This slide shows you some of the documentation that can be utilized to help establish a health or a safety risk which could warrant additional budget dollars in order to meet that need. The new budget notices will also include the health risk form and the safety risk form, so that an individual has ready access to those forms, can complete that form and submit it with their ISP and costing sheet to be reviewed by a care manager to potentially be approved above their budget. Next, I want to talk a little bit about an additional little wrinkle with regard to the implementation of the new model, and that is the impact of the current public health emergency and the American Rescue Plan. Because of COVID-19, we are still under a federal public health emergency. We do not yet know when that's going to end. The federal government provided states with extra money to support supports and services because of the public health emergency. This was through something known as the American Rescue Plan, or ARP. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services also put in place special rules because of the public health emergency. They also said that states can only keep the money that they received from the American Rescue Plan if they take certain actions. As a result of all of these situations and all of these applicable rules, the way we're going to implement the new budget model is going to be a little bit different than we initially anticipated. The ARP rules essentially say three things. The first is that the state cannot make it any harder to be found eligible for services than it was on April 1st, 2021. The second is that people must be able to keep getting the amount and type of service they were able to get on April 1st, 2021. And the third is that provider rates cannot go lower than they were on that date. The department is still working with CMS to figure out exactly how this is going to impact the implementation of the new model and exactly for how long. For now, the department thinks it's going to have three specific impacts. The first is that anyone who is currently eligible for the DD program will stay eligible for as long as the ARP requirements are in place. The second is that any new applicants who are found ineligible using the Vineland III will have a chance to be assessed using the CBAR instead. The third is that participants will have access to their current budget until all of those ARP requirements are met, which is projected right now as ending in March of 2024, but that date could change. So what that means is that annual budget notices will need to include both those budgets that are determined using the new model and the highest budget that someone was assigned between April 1st, 2021 and the implementation of the new model. For most participants, that will just be equivalent to their current KW budget because that was the highest budget they were assigned in those dates. What that means is that the budget notice, and this is a screenshot from the draft budget notices, will state the advisory budget. The advisory budget simply means the budget calculated with the new model. It will include the total of the advisory budget, and then it will provide the total for each of the subcategories: residential, discretionary, and planning. It will also include the ARP budget, which is the highest budget they were assigned between April 1st, 2021 and the date of implementation. An individual's assigned budget will simply be the higher of those two amounts. If someone's advisory budget is higher than their ARP budget, then that will be their assigned budget. If someone's ARP budget is higher than their advisory budget, then the ARP budget will be put in the line for their assigned budget. So just as a reminder, individuals who receive certified family homes can receive any of the following services within their discretionary budget. That includes developmental therapy evaluation, community habilitation, non-medical transportation, adult day health, pre-vocational, and career planning. They can also receive those health and safety services as well as employment supports that we just described. I'm going to pause again for questions. and then give us a quick break before we dig into the rest of the presentation. If folks would like to provide comment on the conversation about CFH rates, what is the best address for them, web address for them to provide such comments to, Olivia?
We could use the HCBS waivers at dhw.idaho.gov. And I could enter that in the chat.
Thank you so much. That is the only question I see in chat. Do we have any hands raised?
I don't see any.
Okay. Then why don't we go ahead and break for 5 minutes? We will reconvene at either 11:40 or 12:40, depending on your time zone, and we will then dig into the new ISP, how plans are developed, and how folks get services. All right, before we move forward, I believe that George has his hand raised. Tammy, would you unmute George so we can see if he has a question for us?
Sure.
George, okay. We're having problems getting into the chat thing. We can't get into it.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Do you have a specific question for us or just wanting to know how to get into the chat?
Well, I had a question clear back on slide 14.
Well, give it
When
to me and I'll do my best.
I'm sorry, well, that's the one where they talk about how many, when you do the assessment, and we were in the guinea pigs that helped Derek pass his thing, I hope. And it said that you had to have the client there if they so wished, and 2 people that knew him.
Yep.
Well, and then you said something else about 2 other people, but there's just the 3, isn't there?
Yes, there's just the 3. So you need to have
Or could we have more than 3?
You can have more than 3. But there must be 2 respondents who know the participant well to participate in the interview, and the individual can be one of the respondents as well if they would like, and they can either be there or not. It really is up to their discretion.
Okay, all right. Well, we were in that initial thing. We participated in the, whatever they called it, volunteer. That was it. Not
You
guinea
volunteered for a practice CSA
Yeah.
in the last few months?
pig. Just a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, so what you should know about that then is that you will be automatically placed into Group C, which means that you'll get a new CSA and a Vineland along with implementation, but then you won't need your next CSA and Vineland for 3 years. So you'll get those
Okay.
2 years of focused reviews before you need to do a whole complete new assessment.
Okay, all right.
I had a question on who actually does the assessments.
So right now, Liberty Healthcare is the contractor who is the assessment contractor for the department. And so that who will conduct the assessments. Right now, these are happening via Zoom, but we hope that those will resume in person shortly.
So when they conduct the assessment, then the numbers that you gave, the score
Mhm.
comes from the answers to those questions, correct?
That's
Is that-
correct.
Okay.
So what happens is they enter in the responses to the survey, to the interview. Then they will go back and enter those into the computer system to identify the level that is relevant. If the individual has requested to go through verification review, they will get you the verification questionnaire to allow you to complete that and send in documentation. But if you don't request verification, then the budget notice will include what level you were assigned and the eligibility determination, which will show you exactly what level you were assigned and what your scores came out. Another thing to know is that the eligibility and budget notice will include a printout of the Vineland III and the CSA, so you can see how the responses then equate to the level the individual was assigned to.
Okay, and the way I understand it is it's not testing the person's ability. It's assessing more what would be required for that person to, quote unquote, lead a normal life.
So the CSA in particular is an assessment that's intended to identify what supports the individual needs. So what would they need to be able to successfully do any of the tasks or activities that are being asked about?
Okay,
It is a support needs assessment versus being a deficit-based assessment, so that we can then make sure that people get into a level that would offer them enough support to get those supports that they need.
okay, all right. It was the only complaint we had about the assessment was it was quite long. It took us 3 hours. And our son is severe profound, so a lot of the questions didn't need to be explained in such detail because they didn't really pertain to him anyway, because he is so involved. So that was our only thing about the assessment. It could have been a little bit shorter if we hadn't had each question explained in such detail, which they may get better as they go along, because I realize it's a new program.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback. And we do know that the assessments are taking a fair amount of time right now. The goal is to try to, as people get more used to the new assessments, to try to make that process move along. But we want to make sure that people get a chance to really accurately describe their support needs to make sure they get assigned to a level that's going to be relevant for them. So it is a little bit of a longer process. Our hope is that it's also a little bit more of a positive or strengths-based process than some of the assessments that we've done in the past. So I know that that was a lot of feedback that the department received about some of the other assessments from participants.
Right. And it's hard to get an assessment going when you have so many levels that you have to, every question has to pertain to every level of ability. And
Yeah.
so that makes it pretty difficult to break it down, I guess I want to say. I don't know how to say it. You know, because there's a lot of the clients that you're assessing have much more ability than our son, who doesn't have, I mean, he's severe profound. So, you know, it just makes it a little more lengthy from that standpoint. And
Understood. Yeah.
I'll be quiet and let you go on.
Thank you so much for your questions. All right. So far we've walked through the assessment process, what the new assessments are, and how those are used to establish eligibility, both for the program and for the waiver, as well as the assessment that's utilized to establish someone's support level. We also have talked about how someone gets their service mix and how someone gets to a budget using the model mixes that are described or that are specific to each support level and each service mix. We've also talked about how somebody can get services beyond their budget using the budget modifications, and have outlined the services that are available to participants who receive certified family home services in the traditional section of the budget. We also have talked about some of the nuances of how we're going to begin the new program because of the requirements of the public health emergency and the American Rescue Plan. So the next thing we want to describe is around how plans get developed and services are provided. So plans are going to be developed a little bit differently to align with the new budget model and the HCBS, or Home and Community-Based Services, settings rule. More services are going to be available to be chosen from, including the 3 new services we've already talked about. We've also reduced a number of sublimits. There's also some flexibility to move between budget components, and plan developers are tasked with working directly with participants and their support teams to determine exactly what services they want to receive and how that could look a little bit different than how they get services today. In the next few slides, we want to walk you through the new individual support plan form and show you some of the changes that will be coming forward when we implement the new model. So the beginning of the individual support plan, service plan form, has just the basic personal information. It also includes the information for the plan developer. Oh. Next slide. Next, we talk about the participants' goals. We talk about their strengths, what's important to that person, and what they would identify as their goals. We ask what activities they would like assistance with to achieve their desired outcomes, who they want to live with or receive services from, and what alternative service options were considered. We then talk about risk factors, including what risks there are to the participant and those around them, and what measures are in place to help mitigate those risks. If there are any rights being restricted due to risks, that will need to be marked on the ISP, and we'll need to describe exactly why those rights are being restricted, a clear description of the intervention that's being used to make sure that the support doesn't harm the participant, any less intrusive methods that were tried first, how the provider will then collect data to ensure that the restriction is effective and necessary, and how often the support team will determine if that restriction is still necessary. Then we detail some of the requirements around the service coordination before we dig into the kinds of services that someone chooses to receive. This includes identifying the DD paid services, so the service and the provider for that service, the non-DD paid services, so the kinds of services that someone may get from other kinds of providers, including their doctor, their primary care physician, any medication management services, or perhaps services that are provided by a different waiver. We then detail any natural or unpaid supports that are relevant for the individual, before then detailing and getting a signature from the participant and or their guardian around informed consent, around informed choice, and the signature from the plan developer. Specific to certified family homes, there's also a requirement to complete a questionnaire. This will also be submitted with the plan or the applicable addendum. This questionnaire includes the provider's name, whether or not the participant is choosing to access alone time. If they are, details around that alone time, including the total number of hours per week and the amount of that time that can be used in one sitting. So someone may be able to receive 14 hours of alone time per week, but only in 2-hour intervals. Both when and where that alone time can occur, and whether or not the PCP team agrees that alone time is safe. It will also include the informal and the formal goals and the signature from the certified family home provider. RISE will continue being the certified family home program coordinator. That means that for initial CFH goals, these goals can be left as to be developed until RISE has had a chance to develop the implementation plan. So now we've talked about how you develop the plan, and we've talked about the kinds of services that someone may receive. And for a lot of participants, they'll simply receive their services all year until they need to get their assessment for the next plan year. However, there are some individuals who may want to make changes to their plan or the services they receive during the year. In some circumstances within the new model, changes to the plan will require the development of a new plan. This is known as a mid-year plan. There are 3 particular scenarios that could cause the need for a new mid-year plan, which will then receive a prorated budget and a full plan development. There are still also plan addendums that exist, but those will just be limited to changes in how an individual wants to use the dollars that they were allocated, but are not changing their level or their service mix. So the 3 kinds of mid-year plans are as follows. The first is a change in condition. An individual may need a mid-year plan if they've requested a change in condition and as a result are assigned to a new support level. Then they will get a new prorated budget and develop a new plan. Participants who would like to change their service mix during the year will also receive a prorated budget and will have to develop a new plan as a result. Participants who declined to go through verification review at the time of their assessment, but later decide to go through that process, and as a result are assigned to levels M or B, will also have to develop a new plan based on being assigned to a new level. A change in condition exists when a participant has an assessment that no longer accurately describes their needs. The plan developer will need to complete a change in condition request form detailing exactly what change has occurred. They'll also need to provide supporting documentation to show that the individual's needs have changed in such a way as to warrant a new assessment. Liberty will then review the request and the documentation that was submitted to see if the requirements are met to need a new assessment. If this change in condition request is approved, then Liberty will contact the individual and or their support team to schedule new assessments. After that assessment is completed, Liberty will send out a new budget notice. If the change in condition resulted in a new support level, the plan developer will need to develop a new plan with the team that will then be prorated for the rest of the year. If the change in condition request and resulting assessment did not result in a new support level being assigned, then a new plan will not need to be developed because the old level and the old budget would still apply. Here's a copy of the change in condition request form. Across the top, you see contact information. We then ask a question asking you to describe the condition that has changed. You then describe how the current assessment does not reflect the current status of the participant and detail the records that are being submitted to substantiate the change in condition and the need for a new assessment. The participant and/or their guardian, if applicable, then sign and date the form and submit it to the information coordinator at BDDS. Service mix changes are applicable when a participant has not had a change in their needs, but simply wants to receive their services in a different way, meaning that their service mix no longer applies. This could be a participant who wants to change their living situation, so move from a certified family home into supported living, or a participant who wants to move from, say, traditional services into self-direction. Either of those kinds of changes could warrant a service mix change request. Liberty will begin by determining whether all of the necessary information has been received and whether the participant has a CSA on file. If a CSA has already been completed, then the service mix change request can be processed just by using a file review. If the participant has not yet had a CSA, they will need to be scheduled for a full assessment, so both the CSA and the Vineland III, and then Liberty will conduct that assessment and mail out the new budget notice to the participant and/or guardian. Here's a copy of the service mix change request form. Again, contact information for the participant and the guardian, a question that asks whether or not the participant has received a CSA, and then an identification of the currently assigned service mix and the requested service mix. We understand that the concept of service mix is a little bit new, so that may not be terminology that folks are used to. However, let's say that you are currently serving a participant who lives in your certified family home using the traditional waiver. That individual wants to move to self-direction. Well, the currently assigned service mix for that individual would be traditional certified family home because they live in a certified family home and receive traditional services. If that individual wants to move to self-direction, individuals who receive supports from a certified family home provider on self-direction are assigned to the SD live-in support service mix. So on the right-hand side of the form, that's the box that would be checked, SD live-in supports, showing that they would still like to receive supports from a certified family home, but would like to self-direct their services. You then would simply sign as the participant or the guardian if applicable and submit this form to the information coordinator. Note that service mixes can be changed at the discretion of the participant as they see fit. The one caveat is that if somebody is currently assigned to the DD state plan or the state plan HCBS only mix, in order to change from that mix, they would need to become eligible for the DD waiver. Some individuals may already meet the requirements for ICFID level of care, but not receive waiver services because they're receiving other waiver services, like receiving the aged and disabled waiver. If that were the case, then someone would simply need to change and make sure they were eligible for ICFID in order to move to a different service mix. The third possible reason why somebody might require a mid-year plan is the result of an off-cycle verification request. Participants are able to request verification at any time. However, if that request is made more than 30 days after the assessment, Liberty has been instructed to confirm that there has not been any change in the participant's needs, which is creating the cause of that request. If someone is seeking verification because their needs have changed, they would instead need to complete a change in condition request form. If there's not been any change in the participant's needs, they simply did not request verification at the time of their assessment, but now would like to seek verification for a support need that has always existed, they can go ahead and complete the verification questionnaire, submit supporting documentation to Liberty to then be assessed by the verification review team. If the verification review team finds the participant is eligible for levels M or B, then they will receive a notice and a new budget. They'll then need to prepare a new plan, and they'll receive a prorated budget for the rest of the plan year to do so. If the verification review team finds the participant is not eligible for levels M or B, the participant will also receive a notice with the decision that they can keep their service plan as it currently is because their support level will not have changed. The rest of the presentation provides just a quick overview of some of the new services and provides some additional resources. So before we dig into that, why don't we pause and answer any questions that have come up? Okay. The first question is there a definition of alone time? Alone in a room, alone at home by oneself? Livia, is that something you could answer?
Sure. It's if the participant is left alone at home, so they don't have any paid supports or any natural supports with them at home during that time.
Thank you so much. And then we have a question is, can we get a copy of these slides in a document form? Yes, these slides will be converted to a PDF and placed on the My Choice Matters site so folks can have access to them. The recording of this presentation will also be placed up on the My Choice Matters site. PDF versions of all of the trainings that are being made available to a variety of stakeholder groups are going up on the My Choice Matters site as they're being completed. So you'll just simply want to make sure you're looking for the slideshow presentation that's specific to your provider type. Note that the majority of material in the presentation is identical. There's just some elements that are specifically targeted to a given kind of provider or a given kind of audience. And then do we have any hands raised at this time?
I don't think George put their hand down.
Okay.
And then there was a question just come in the Q&A. Is there a training for the A&D waiver?
There is not a specific training for the A&D waiver at this time, as the A&D waiver is not changing as the result of this shift to the budget model for DD services. However, the information and materials related to this presentation are relevant for someone who is receiving adult DD services that are specific to the state plan. So, for example, someone who is receiving DDA services. Information about exactly what services are available on the state plan and available to somebody who's receiving the A&D waiver can be included, is shown in the model mixes. So again, for somebody in that situation, you'd want to look at the state plan HCBS only model mix, as that is the mix that applies, and that will provide information as to the relevant budget and the services that are available for those participants. Anything else?
I don't see anything else.
All right, then let's keep going. So as I mentioned, there are 3 new services that are going to be available once we move into the new model. We wanted to provide a little more information about those new services so folks are aware of what is available for participants to access. The first of those new services is community habilitation. This service can be provided by a residential habilitation or developmental disability agency. It must be provided in the community and is intended to promote skills to participate in community activities, social clubs, events, or volunteering. It can be provided on an individual or a group basis and is a service that's targeted to be used at times where perhaps regular DDA services are not available. This is a service that can be used on nights, on weekends. Perhaps there is a knitting club that a participant would like to participate in and build some natural supports around other people who are also interested in their area of interest, knitting. They could receive community habilitation service. They could get that service one-on-one or in a group in order to go and participate actively in that knitting club and build more community around that shared interest. Pre-vocational services is a service that's provided by a supported employment agency. The goal of that service is to teach general employment-related skills in a community setting for the purposes of helping to prepare somebody for future paid employment. The goal of this service is not to teach skills specific to a certain job, but more general skills that are necessary to improve someone's employability. Helping someone to learn how to dress professionally, how to get places on time, how to access transportation to a job, how to interact appropriately with coworkers and customers, are all the kinds of skills that could be taught as a part of pre-vocational services. This service is limited to 520 hours total over the life of the participant, and it can be accessed over 2 different plan years. Those plan years do not need to be consecutive, but can be 2 years at any point. It is offered on both an individual and a group basis. The third new service is career planning. The service is also provided by a supported employment agency, and this service is directed at helping a participant to identify their career objectives and build a plan for how to attain or advance their goals around competitive integrated employment. This is a service that may be a great fit for somebody who is working in a job but doesn't feel like it's a job they want long term. They want to really develop a new plan for their career. Thinking about how they can make steps towards getting the job of their dreams is something that is well targeted for career planning. This service is is limited to an individual basis and is time limited, which means it can only be provided for up to 4 hours in any given week. Another thing we wanted to just highlight is the expansion of non-medical transportation under the new model. This service is now being moved to the state plan to allow individuals who are not accessing the waiver to be able to receive this service. And the goal of this service is to help participants get transportation to and from the site of other discrete services or community activities where they will not be receiving any paid supports. Now, transportation is still an integral part of the Certified Family Home Service, and that is transportation that's specific to helping the participant meet their goals, desired outcomes, and needs as specifically specified in that implementation plan. Non-medical transportation, by and large, comes from the discretionary supports portion of the budget, but there is not a limit as to the amount of miles that someone can put on their plan. Transportation can also be provided as an employment support if that transportation is to or from a community job. This could be a job where someone is receiving supported employment or a job where someone is working unsupported and they simply need transportation support in order to maintain that job. Some individuals who are currently providing certified family home services may want to also enroll as a non-medical transportation provider in order to help support transportation for the participant to receive other services or to help a participant transfer into other community activities where they may not be supported. If you would like more information about how to do that, you can contact the Gainwell enrollment representative in your region, as you will need to provide a provider enrollment application for non-medical transportation in order to add that service. Anyone on the call today who is not currently enrolled as a certified family home provider can become enrolled by contacting your local certified family home agent. That enrollment will also need to happen through Gainwell for Medicaid. And here is a list of the certifying agent for each of the applicable regions if that were to apply for you. We also want to make sure that folks know and have access to all of the relevant IDAPA rules for certified family home providers. So they're provided on this slide for easy reference. Again, these slides will be made available on the My Choice Matters website for later reference. We've also provided the rules applicable for non-medical transportation providers in case any providers on the call today are interested in potentially adding that service to the array that they offer. And here is a list of contacts and resources that may be applicable. That includes the My Choice Matters website, a link to the broader IDAPA rules, a link to the Community Now website, and a link to the provider handbook. As we've already noted, the program manual for traditional will be made available shortly on the department website and will also be posted on the My Choice Matters website. With that, I think we can open it up to questions for the remainder of our time together.
Okay, we have a question from Teresa. You're unmuted.
I can't keep, I try, and I was a social worker back in Illinois, but I can't keep some of these budget things clear. So I just wanted to ask somebody in person, in case we work on this in the future, can the discretionary budget transportation portion be applied or added to? It's probably going to be a no, but added to the budget for, which is low, and they're having trouble getting workers, is my concern, for developmental therapy therapists, providers. The well, we used to call them aides. the state, not the state, the different companies are having trouble hiring people to take others into the community or to work with them in centers because the state is not able to pay as much as, boy, the inflation of wages has gone up like crazy. And so I'm wondering if that transportation cost can be added to that, or is that just such a different thing? It's different only for employment or something like that. That would help supplement their costs for gas and running them around the community. Does that make sense?
Yes. So the rate for developmental therapy has or will be increasing very shortly. A new rate for that service, as well as both developmental therapy community-based and center-based, as well as adult day health, were all included in the budget that was approved by the legislature. So those rates will be changing shortly. Transportation to get to, say, a DDA, where someone is going to obtain that developmental therapy service, is a non-emergency medical transportation service. So someone can use non-emergency medical transportation to get a ride from the home to the DDA, where they would then begin the process of receiving their developmental therapy service. And while the value or the cost of non-medical transportation couldn't be added to that service, someone could become authorized to provide non-medical transportation and provide that to an individual in order to begin accessing to move to or from a different waiver service, or to get support to get out into the community where they're not then going to receive a paid service.
That's helpful to know. Thank you very much. I will write that down. Thank you.
I see another question here that says, when I go to www. My Choice Matters, it takes me to the health and welfare site. That is correct. Yes. So the My Choice Matters website was initially housed outside of the department. It now has been pulled in and is a part of the broader department website. But if you go to www.mychoicematters.idaho.gov, that will still get you to the right information, and it will transfer you to a department website. What if a client needs a job coach for the whole time they're employed and not just 2 years? So the limitation on 2 years for job coaching, I believe, is specific to job coaching that's provided by vocational rehabilitation. There is not a 2-year limit on job coaching that's provided by the department. So if someone were to need continued support in their job, they could obtain supported employment as an employment service through their waiver and continue getting that support. Can someone on the DD waiver in a CFH get music therapy on the discretionary budget part with traditional service? I was told at one time someone on self-direct could, but not for traditional services. So music therapy is not one of the approved discretionary services, or not one of the approved services on the waiver as a whole. So it's my understanding that that is not a service that someone could get on the waiver, but that someone who was self-directing and wrote that into their plan could obtain that service, as there is some additional flexibility that's available in self-direction for services that are not defined services on the waiver. Anything you would add to that, Livia?
Nope, that is correct, Alina. Thank you.
And then, do we have any other hands raised?
Yeah. Okay, Teresa, you're unmuted.
Oh, thank you. Again, about the American Rescue Plan, I'm kind of wondering, as of now, the changes won't be made because until March 2024. What's going to change that? What would that be? Just a difference in how COVID is going? Is that kind of what they're...
So the requirements under the American Rescue Plan is that while the state is still utilizing monies that were provided from the American Rescue Plan, or still using monies of the equivalent value. So let's just say, because small numbers work better for my head, that if the federal government gave the state $1 extra because of the American Rescue Plan, the rules say that the state has to spend that dollar and has to spend one of its own dollars before those requirements go away. So the reason why we're targeting March of 2024 as the end date for the American Rescue Plan requirements is because that is when the state is anticipating they will have spent all of the additional dollars the federal government has provided, as well as the equivalent state dollars they're required to spend in order to obtain that money. So that date could change if it takes longer to spend the funds that the government has provided and then the state's equivalent funds than is currently anticipated. What that means is when the requirements of the American Rescue Plan go away, individuals who are assessed using the Vineland III and are not identified as meeting program eligibility would receive a denial notice. Individuals will receive budgets that are based on the new budget model and will not still have access to that ART budget or the highest budget they had from April 1st, 2021 until we begin implementation. Again, there is no intention from the department to restrict the eligibility requirements for the waiver or for the program by moving to this new tool. It really is that the tool, the CBR, is no longer supported. And so continuing to use that tool is difficult if the very antiquated and old computer system that's used to process that were to go down. And so if the department identifies during evaluation that will happen during implementation that maybe the requirements using the Vineland III are stricter, then the state will do an evaluation of that and may adjust those requirements because that is not the intent. We will also be doing an evaluation of the new budget model once we roll out to see if it needs to be modified or adjusted to meet participants' needs and ensure that people are getting the service and supports that they require.
The part I didn't understand is it linked to COVID? So that's what my question was. It's not necessarily COVID.
The dollars are linked to COVID.
Yeah.
That's why we got the dollars initially, but it's completely based on how long it takes the state to spend the money, not related to the status of COVID more generally.
Now I got it. Thank you
The
very
public
much.
health emergency is related to the status of COVID.
Right.
And those requirements will be in place until the federal public health emergency end and are a little bit different than the requirements related to the American Rescue Plan. There's a lot going on and it gets a little bit confusing.
Well, I'll just keep asking questions. At that point. Thank you very much.
Okay, I see another question that says, I'm already using MTM for next reimbursement. Will I now need to go through Gainwell to be a provider?
I can try to answer that, Alina.
Thank you.
So if your participant is using MTM for transportation, that is the medical transportation contractor, and that is transportation to developmental therapy. If you want to add on to become a non-emergency medical transportation provider, then you are going to have to go through Gainwell Technologies and submit an application for that. If you yourself, as a certified family home, want to provide non-medical transportation.
And I think that Teresa may have another question.
Oh. Okay.
Thank you. Yes, I do. I didn't hear anything anywhere about a targeted service coordinator. Are those going away? Are they staying? Or they have a different name?
They're just now referred to as service coordinators. The term targeted has just been removed, but participants will still have a service coordinator who will help monitor their plan throughout the year, as well as a plan developer to help folks build that plan initially. Often that's going to be the same person.
Got it. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, and it looks like George has a question.
There you go.
Oh, never mind. I think the only question I have, are they gonna do these evaluations over the phone or are they gonna do them in person? The reason
So,
why,
go ahead, George.
over the phone with somebody that can't communicate might be harder to evaluate than if it was in person. Because
So the assessments that are happening now, and so that the assessments, if that's what you mean by evaluation, are currently happening via Zoom just because of COVID. And when I talk about the evaluation of the model, so making sure the model is working, and the evaluation of the new assessment tools to make sure that they're working as intended, that evaluation is going to be using a lot of different techniques, including looking at data, looking at plans, and probably some interviews with individuals. Exactly how that's going to happen will be determined a little bit later when we know exactly what's the status of COVID.
And then I have a question. This is Mrs. George. What I don't understand what the Vineland 3 is, or Vineland you were talking about. Where
Yep.
does that come in?
So the Vineland III is the tool that we use to see if someone's eligible for the program as a whole, and the tool that helps to see if someone meets ICFID level of care. That means that they're eligible to receive the waiver. So
Okay.
that tool is used for those purposes, and the CSA is what helps us get to the budget.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I see a question here that says, can the service coordinator be one of the respondents for the assessment? Yes, the service coordinator can be one of the respondents. Will assessments be done at their office or in our homes once they can be done in person? It's my understanding that Liberty will work with you to find a place that's going to be mutually convenient to do assessments when they start happening in person again. That may be coming to your home, or it could be going to their office potentially if that would be preferable. Wanting to readdress the question around alone time. So the response to that was that alone time refers to any time that the participant would be alone, either in their home or in the community. That would mean that they are there without either a paid support person or a natural support person. So truly not around another person providing some supports. It would not need to be utilized if someone was, say, alone in their bedroom, but someone else was also in the home.
Then we have a question from Kathy. I'll unmute you. Okay, Kathy.
Are you there, Kathy? I'm sorry, Kathy. If you're speaking, I can't hear you. Oh, I see a question in chat. Where can I read more about transportation? You can get more information about the transportation service in the IDAPA rules. You also are welcome to send an email to the HCBS mailbox if you have more specific questions about transportation. Or you can contact Gainwell if you'd like to consider becoming a non-medical transportation provider. And yes, we did respond to the alone time question. If you have some more questions about alone time, please feel free to raise your hand and we can take you off mute. George, do you have another question?
Alone time, but if we need to count this towards training for a certified family home, how do we verify that we were in your class?
Oh, I could absolutely answer that for you. So all you'll need to do is when you are providing your documentation of the training that you've done, just provide the date of this training we will be providing the list of all attendees to this training to licensing and certification so that they can then cross-check and see that you were in attendance at one of these trainings.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
And then can we take Beth off mute?
Yes.
Hello, hey, I'm sorry. I didn't hear your response to the alone time question.
Yeah, no problem. So
I
alone time
apologize. There was a
is
lot of noise going on outside my office.
alone time is relevant when the individual or the participant is going to be truly alone in their home. So without a paid support person present or without a natural support present, or when someone is going to be out in the community alone. So if an individual is, say, in their bedroom alone, but there's someone else in the home, then that would not require an identification of alone time. It's truly if no one else is present that could be available to provide that support.
Okay. So that will still be available for people that already right now have alone time in a certified family home setting?
Yes, absolutely. Folks who already have approved alone time can continue having approved alone time, and through the process of the plan development, they can even, change or alter the amount of alone time and the duration of alone time based on what everyone agrees makes the most sense for that individual.
Okay, thank you.
And then do we want to try to unmute Kathy again? I see her hand is still up, just in case.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah, I didn't mean to do that. So I'm just kind of wondering, what is the difference between the medical transportation and the non-emergency medical transportation? Are there non-emergency transportation?
So non-emergency medical transportation is the kind of transportation that you can receive to go to doctor's appointments or to go to a DDA in order to receive developmental therapy. Non-medical transportation is transportation that is from one waiver or non-waiver service to another service, or transportation to a community event of the person's choosing. So non-emergency medical transportation is limited to things that are medically related. So those doctor's appointments. Developmental therapy is considered as being medically related, which is why that counts. And then emergency medical is ambulances and such, as you would expect.
Okay, perfect. So this new thing with Gainwell would be just for like if I transported him somewhere in the community instead of like to the DDA.
So if you as a certified family home provider wanted to also become authorized as a non-medical transportation provider, you could do so. And that could be, so let's say that a participant you're serving is going to receive the community habilitation service from a different provider, and they're going to go to knitting club. If you wanted to become a non-medical transportation provider, you could bill the 56 cents a mile to take the person from the service in your home, the certified family home service, to another service to go and receive that knitting club service from a community habilitation provider at where the knitting club meets. Or you could just provide them the transportation to meet their community habilitation provider within the scope of your certified family home service. That would really be up to you. Also, if you were going to transport someone to an event where they were going to be alone in the community and not receive any supports, and you were going to do that outside of the scope of your certified family home goals, that could be done as a separate non-medical transportation service. Again, there is still transportation requirements within the scope of your certified family home service, the kinds of transportation that are necessary in order for the participant to meet the goals as outlined in that questionnaire and in their plan. But there is the potential that you could become another provider type if you so chose in order to provide some additional kinds of transportation related to other services or goals that are outside of those certified family home goals.
Okay, excellent. And so, but it doesn't really change the MTM transportation then.
It
Is
does
that
not
correct?
affect the MTM transportation.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, I see one more question, which is, if a social worker that is their counselor is a respondent on the self-directed services, can they get paid for their time? This would be supported living, not CFH. I'm not sure that I'm fully understanding that question. If the person who asked it could raise your hand and maybe provide a little more detail, that would be helpful. I also see a question that says, what if they are at the movies with their sibling? Is that alone time? Lydia, could you answer that?
That would not be alone time because they are with natural supports. The siblings are acting as a natural support.
And I also see a question that says, so the other dates for this workshop are the same information as this. Yes, that is correct. Because there are so many certified family home providers, we wanted to make sure we made multiple training dates available to account for people's changing schedules and to hopefully keep participants at a reasonable number so we're able to unmute the phone lines and answer questions verbally. So if you attended today's training, you do not need to attend one of the other two. It will be the same information shared again.
Okay. Tina, you're unmuted.
Hi, I apologize for asking this question during certified family home, but so my other son is also disabled and he receives self-directed services. So normally we have his counselor as his respondent. So if she takes off work from her business to come and be his respondent, can we pay her to be his respondent through the self-directed services?
Being a respondent to the assessments, right? The CSA and the Vineland III?
Yes.
Okay. Livia, can you answer that for us?
So if she is one of his community support workers providing support for him during that time, she would be able to bill for it. If she's attending just as a respondent and not to support him during that assessment, she would not be able to bill because she's not providing a direct support for him during that time. So she's not providing the counseling services for him during that time.
Okay. So, okay, I'm going to ask her kind of a weird question then. So if she's not supporting him during that because he may not be able to participate during the whole assessment because he has autism and doesn't deal well with that sometimes, if someone is a professional and like a counselor and they don't want to do it if they're not getting paid, how does that help the participant? I know this kind of sounds weird, but it's like, a lot of people want to be paid for their time. So how does that work if it's a situation where he may not be able to be there the entire time, but she was going to be there as his respondent, and then if he leaves, she has to leave. See what I mean?
Yeah, so unfortunately, she would not be able to get paid for the time of being the respondent unless she was supporting him directly during that time. So let's say if he wasn't even going to be at the assessment, if she was going to be a respondent, she would have to do it as a natural support because she would not be able to be billing time for working with him during that time because she's not directly working with him.
Okay. And I think that she's always done it just as a natural support, but I was just questioning that. I wasn't sure. In fact, she has always done it as a natural support, but I just wasn't sure how this new thing was changing. So, okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
And then I see one more question. I know we're over time, but I'm okay staying for another moment or two to answer the last couple questions, which is there going to be a recording available to review this training and how will you access it? Yes, this training has been recorded. It takes a couple of days for that to again then get processed and entered up onto the My Choice Matters website. However, it will be available on the My Choice Matters website under the training button, and you'll be able to see a recording of this training at that location. And yes, in addition to the recording, the slides themselves will also be made available on that location. So you'll be able to see the PDF of the slides and refer to those or to watch the recording, whatever would make the most sense for you.
It looks like Beth has her hand raised. Okay, Beth, you're unmuted.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know that my hand was raised. I don't have a
That's
question.
A-okay.
Sorry.
Okay, no problem.
All right. I don't see any other hands, nor do I see any other questions. The only other thing, and I apologize, I meant to include a slide that had this, is that we do have a survey asking for feedback from individuals who attend these trainings on any additional information that might be helpful, or really any feedback on how we can improve the trainings. As you can see that we're doing a lot of trainings over the next little while. And we want to make sure that we're covering the information that you folks need. So I am copying right now and dropping that survey link into the chat. Again, it should only take a moment or two to complete. It's just kind of a 2-question survey asking what training you attended, was the information useful, and what, if any, additional information would be helpful to receive. We'd love it if you take a moment to do that, just so we can make sure that we're getting you the information you need to help with the successful implementation of the new model. I want to thank you all for your time today, and we hope you guys have a great weekend.